So let's begin with some meditation. Sit comfortably. I'll try to set a good motivation. Relax your body and relax your mind. If you want, focus on your respiration. Of course, your aim from the beginning is to try to quiet the mind so that you can develop good qualities, eliminate your faults for the welfare of others. So keep that in mind. What you're trying to do is let go of all of the other discursive thoughts, and you're taking the respiration, first of all, as a focus to tie the wild elephant of your mind to. You can bring it back to that again and again, away from the other thoughts. If you'd like to think in ordered steps, think, first of all, I'm going to try to take my attention away from the outer distractions, watching the breathing. And then even from the inner distractions, other distracting thoughts in your consciousness, bring your attention back to the breathing. Then bring your attention to your mental consciousness. Recall that although we have a opportunity now, leisure and endowment, perfect human rebirth, it's incredibly meaningful if we use it for dharmic purposes, to do good, to overcome our faults, accumulate merit, purify negativity. We could, if we were fortunate, if we created the right causes, attain enlightenment on the basis of this kind of body, in this one short life of a degenerate age, through the practice of Highest Yoga Tantra. At least we could make the first steps of leaving a strong imprint of bodhicitta in our minds, compassion, altruism, if not actually developing it, spontaneous bodhicitta. Make some insights into the the correct view of reality, emptiness, all based on a heartfelt sense of renunciation. This life, however, is very fragile. It's definite to end, and with every moment we're streaming toward that inevitable end of our life. So in order to familiarize ourselves with the stages of death, let's again imagine, first of all, whether we're seated in meditation or on our bed, passing away in the last hours of our life. First of all, the earth element and the form aggregate dissolve. The airs, the prana upon which they depend, first of all, absorb toward the heart chakra. Our eye faculty, the support of our eye consciousness, also becomes less possible to support the eye consciousness as the winds engaging it absorb. Forms become unclear. The wisdom in our consciousness now, basic wisdom, time of the basis, mirror-like in quality, begins to absorb. The solidity of our body decreases. We look less robust, more pallor, less vibrant color. We recognize this. Others around us can recognize those outer signs, but we recognize also within our own consciousness, if our mind is not distracted, we notice the appearance of a mirage-like vision appearing to the mental consciousness due to this dissolution of the earth element and the ascendancy of the water element. Try to simulate that in your own consciousness. Think that at the time of death, the clear light will arise, the mother clear light of death. So during this process, I'm going to try to recall the meditation on emptiness that I've practiced in this lifetime, to try to merge the sun clear light, the realization of emptiness through meditation with a subtle mind, with that mother clear light at that time. So think, this self that we hold on to so dearly, we believe in so strongly, intuitively. This self is an appearance to our consciousness, undoubtedly, but it has no basis in reality existing the way that it appears. Why? Because the self exists as a mere dependent arising, merely imputed upon the body, feelings, discriminations, compositional factors, and consciousness, the five aggregates. If we search within these components of our being, we find no truly existent self. If we search apart from them, we certainly find no truly existent self. So with this somewhat subtle mind, try to recall the meaning of emptiness, focusing on the object to be negated, using reasoning that you're getting more and more familiar with, such as the reasoning of dependent arising, to induce an appearance of vacuity, an emptiness that you recognize as the mere lack of true existence. And over time, the water element itself loses its ability to be sustained by its air, which absorbs, and the fire element has a greater ascendancy. We have the vision of smoke, billowing smoke within a smoked area within our consciousness, while the feeling aggregate and the water element absorb. The ear faculty also dissolves, absorbs, so that our ear consciousness, the ability to hear sounds, degenerates. The basic wisdom of equality absorbs. And with our subtle mental consciousness, becoming slightly more subtle if we're not distracted, we try to discern the appearance that's occurring due to karma of billowing smoke. Recalling that the earth element had just absorbed, well, we saw the mirage-like vision. Next will be the firefly-like vision. That I must remember the meaning of emptiness when the clear light of death appears. I must recall that. Try to again meditate on emptiness with this quieter mind. You can think, for instance, even the aggregates that are the basis for imputing the I. Individually, the form, feelings, so forth, they themselves seem very solid and real, findable. But form is just a name. It's empty of being truly existent. My form aggregate appears to my mind as something findable, real, existing from its own side. But ultimately, it can't be found within the components of the form, the body, or without. Meditate on the emptiness of the 5 aggregates also. After some time, the fire element also begins to dissolve, along with the aggregate of discrimination. The heat of the body diminishes toward the heart. If the initial karma, if we've led a very virtuous life, for the most part, the heat diminishes from our feet first, goes up toward our heart, while our head is still warm. Then the heat comes down to our heart. Our digestion begins to diminish. Basic wisdom of individual analysis absorbs. Our mind, if not trained, is getting fearful if we're still conscious. But to a trained meditator, familiar with this process, we try to recognize the vision that occurs, the firefly-like vision, or vision of sparks, that's occurring to our mental consciousness due to the power of the fire element absorbing. Previously it was the water element, the smoke vision. Next will be the air element absorbing and a dying butter lamp vision. But now the firefly's vision, or sparks, is prominent. And we recall that we're heading toward the clear light of death. I must remember emptiness at that time. I think all beings are empty of true existence. All my friends, enemies, and strangers, all phenomena that are the basis for designating them, and all other phenomena, all the appearances to my mind that occur because of karma during this life, during this process, they have an appearance of true existence, but they are empty of that because all phenomena, like the self, are dependent arisings. After some time, the air element begins to also dissolve, along with the compositional factors aggregate, most of the mental factors. The tongue faculty and the body faculty absorb. We no longer taste nor feel textures on our skin. Our tongue thickens, becomes blue. Our breathing stops as the air element absorbs. To all intents and purposes, medical people would say we have died, but we're still quite a ways from actually the death state. To our mental consciousness, there appears what appears to be the light of a dying butter lamp. Sometimes orange, sometimes blue, wavering. Again now, remember that we're going to be losing our ability to recall and to analyze as the process continues, so make a firm determination. I must remember emptiness at the time of the clear light. Even this appearance within my mental consciousness is empty of true existence. It does appear. We're not saying the appearance does not exist, but there is no objective reality to it. Like the self that appeared to be findable and to have some basis was found to be empty, even appearances are empty of true existence. Then the 80 indicative conceptions absorb. All conceptualizing activity, even compassion and other virtuous states of mind, begin to cease. Previously, the wisdom of accomplishing activities during the air element absorbed. Now the Dharma Dhatu, basic wisdom, absorbs. As the consciousness aggregate begins to absorb, all the gross consciousness now absorbing, again with a subtler vision of dying butter lamp. The mind now not able to analyze in the usual way, but able to recall this appearance, as any appearance that comes to our mind, as not having an inherent existence. Recalling the vacuity of emptiness that we've cultivated earlier. Then as the airs have entered into the right and left nadis predominantly around the central channel, those above the heart ascend and entering into the crown chakra. Crown chakra loosens, the white element there descends, and dawning to a subtler state of mind now, white appearance, empty, like a vast clear sky pervaded by the vibration of moonlight, white moonlight. Again, we're getting closer to the clear light of death, and our mindfulness engages to recognize this as all appearances to our mind are not truly existent. By the force of that mindfulness, we again discern an emptiness, a vast vacuity, which is the mere lack of true existence, having that meaning to our mind. The elements, the air below the heart in the right and left nadis descends to the jewel and secret chakras, entering into the central channel. They ascend to the navel chakra, loosening the knot there. The red element at the navel chakra, along with the winds, begins to ascend up to the heart, and we have a more vast, empty appearance to our subtle mind of reddish, copper-colored sky. The red increase. Again, our mindfulness recognizes this appearance also, as it has a similarity with emptiness already, a vast vacuity. We easily can recall the appearance of clear light, vast vacuity that we recognize as emptiness. As the mind becomes even more subtle, the white and red drops that have descended and ascended to the heart chakra now encapsulate the indestructible drop at the heart. And as they merge with it, and the airs absorb toward there, all the airs through the central channel now, away from the 72,000 nadis of the body, we experience the first part of the black near attainment. Again, like a clear sky, but this time pervaded by the darkness of night, without any light such as stars or whatever else. And we especially try to be aware here of the meaning of emptiness, because coming next will be a moment of unconsciousness and then the clear light. So even this darkness that seems to be pervading our mind is only an appearance. It has no objective, findable reality, nor does any phenomena that's grasped by our mind. No phenomena can be found. Friends, enemies, strangers, good, bad, all are merely imputed by the mind. Then we fall into a deeper darkness without any mindfulness at all. Subtle mind as though pervaded by vastness, vast darkness, as though falling into a swoon or unconsciousness. And then at the heart, the white and red drops slightly separate, and the clear light of death, the actual basis of death, basic death state, although not yet left the body, very vast clarity, very, very subtle mind. Pervading everything, our consciousness, no conception of a subject or object, all unified into one. Clear light, like the appearance of the sky just before dawn in the autumn when the rains have brought all of the dust from the sky, on the particle nature. No clouds, as though you could see forever, crystalline. And although this vacuity occurs to everyone, we try to recall the meaning of this. Mother Clear Light, and recognize it as the meaning of emptiness. We might remain in this state for hours or days, depending on our health and our state of realization. But after some time, a mere movement of the wind at the heart begins the entry into the intermediate state, simultaneous with the dawning of the mind of black near attainment of reverse order, subtle mind of the Bardo being. We already have a Bardo spontaneously born body. Then the red increase, white appearance. The 80 indicative conceptions arise to the Bardo mind. The butter lamp appearance as the wind element evolves and the mental activity, conceptual activity becomes possible. The fire element begins to evolve out. Discrimination aggregate. The vision of fireflies. The vision of smoke as the water element becomes prominent and the body has some mobility, some fluidity. And then the earth element and the form aggregate. Finally, in the Bardo state, perhaps if we're in the same area where we had just left the body, we see the former body but don't recognize it as ourself, completely separate from it. So I think this is something that I will definitely have to experience, this evolution of death. So to understand it better, to prepare for it, I'm going to participate in the class tonight, the 3 basic bodies, how to take death, intermediate state, and rebirth into the final states of Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, and Nirmanakaya, so that I can quickly, if not this lifetime in the Bardo, very quickly in the future, attain enlightenment quickly, so that I can perfectly care for living beings, having overcome all of my faults, attain all knowledge, spontaneously and effortlessly work for all beings. And then bring your attention back. Present. Marty had some good observations there during the meditation. So, How are we doing? Anyone have some questions? Or a question? Leo.
You basically abandon the body at the clear light of death. I mean, you're dead.
At the clear light of death. So remember we were saying before this, the definition of death has to be investigated. When we talk about the basic state of death that's transformed into Dharmakaya, that's defined in Tantra as this clear light of death. But we haven't actually left this body. So in some definitions, when you say death is if you were to define death itself, not the basic state of death, but death as severing the connection with this body and mind, we would have severed all the connection with the gross body and gross mind at this point, but there would still be the connection with this subtle mind. We would not have yet developed the state of mind or the body of the intermediate state. So we're still, that mind is still within the body at the heart chakra at that time. So that's something to investigate about the different definitions of death. Here we're talking about the basic state of death. The clear light of death is the point at which you can meditate on emptiness. And within Tantra, you could use that very subtlemost mind to actually achieve the Dharmakaya, to achieve enlightenment, if you had already accumulated the merit previously. Okay. Another question?
I had one other question.
Okay.
This has to do with the winds. Let me find this here.
Okay. The winds.
Yeah. This is this is in the fifth dissolution. We've gone through the dissolution of the
4 elements.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And we're talking about, in our previous class, you were querying as to whether or not there was one wind that was moving these 80 conceptions, or whether there were several.
Mm-hmm. The question is, here's the question. The question is, these 80 indicative conceptions are renowned in the Tantras to be of 3 levels. One of them are indicative of the white appearance. One group is indicative of the red increase. One of them is indicative of the black near attainment. So some previous scholars had interpreted that to mean that they absorbed at the time of the white appearance, those that were indicative of that. And those that were indicative of the red increase absorbed at the time of the red increase. And those that were indicative of the black near attainment absorbed at that point. But Lama Tsongkhapa pointed out that that's an incorrect understanding, that all of them, the reason they're called indicative conceptions is that they indicate that these 3 states of mind have 3 different levels of strength of their mounting winds. They're becoming subtler and subtler. The white appearance is grosser. The red increase is more subtle. The black near attainment is more subtle than that. And so the mounting winds of these 3 different groups of conceptions that absorb at the time of what's called the 5th dissolution here, the yogis and yoginis who meditate, they can notice that those states of mind have different strengths. Some of them grosser, some of them middling, some of them subtler, and that tends to indicate that one can deduce from that they have come about because of imprints on a mind of. They exist in our mind now because of the when we evolved into this body in a reverse process, the black near attainment, red increase, white appearance, and so forth, as we evolved into this from a previous Bardo state. So the imprints of the black near attainment had a certain strength, and they gave rise to the indicative conceptions that were more subtlest of them, the least strong. And likewise with the red and white appearances, when they evolved, the imprints left in those consciousnesses from previous lives gave rise to these other indicative conceptions. That's what Lama Tsongkhapa explained. So this is it's a bit subtle point, but if you read, oh, I thought you were laughing. There's just a yawn. Okay. Just yawning. Okay.
I thought he was laughing.
I see. Yawning is more or less the same thing. Okay. So someone else have a question? Deanne, you look like you have a question. Yeah. Yes.
Would you kindly explain the different bodies, their enjoyment body and the other two bodies, and how they relate to these different stages?
So that's one of the main subject matters here. We talk about here at this point in Tantra, we're talking about the three bodies: the Dharmakaya, the Sambhogakaya, the enjoyment body, and the Nirmanakaya, the emanation body. Sometimes you hear four bodies, right? When you talk about the nature body also. But here we're just talking about three bodies. So it says in Highest Yoga Tantra that the thing that hinders us from attaining the enlightened state of these three bodies, these unified, having the state which all of these bodies are unified, what hinders us is the impure death, impure intermediate state, impure rebirth that we experience. Impure in the sense that it's not the Buddha's experience. It's still defiled with ignorance and imprints of ignorance and so forth. So what we try to do is, we try to practice to purify impure death, impure intermediate state, and impure rebirth into eventually these three states. They're going to be the aim: the Dharmakaya, the Sambhogakaya, and the Nirmanakaya. The clear light of death that we were just talking about, that Leo was just talking about, the clear light of death, that's the mind is still within the body, that is something that can transform into the eventual Dharmakaya, the what do we call it? What does Jeffrey Hawkins call it? The phenomena body, or the truth body. Dharmakaya is something that we know that word. The Buddha's omniscient mind. The Sambhogakaya is an emanation of the Buddha's mind. It's this very subtle body that only the Arya Bodhisattvas can perceive. So the bardo state or the impure intermediate state, the bardo state that we experience, is very similar to that, because it arises out of the clear light of death, just as in a sense the Sambhogakaya, not necessarily temporally, it doesn't necessarily have to evolve that you first attain the Sambhogakaya, first attain the Dharmakaya, then the Sambhogakaya, then the Nirmanakaya. But at any one moment, the Buddha can emanate from the Dharmakaya a emanation body, enjoyment body, the Sambhogakaya. And that Sambhogakaya can also emanate the Nirmanakaya to different, world systems, for the aid of teaching sentient beings that are not capable of perceiving the enjoyment body, because only the Arya Bodhisattvas can perceive the enjoyment body. So what's talked about here in Highest Yoga Tantra is a procedure to try to use the clear light of death, the bardo state, and the eventual rebirth that we will take, thrown by karma in our case, which is that rebirth is like the Nirmanakaya, emanating something more gross. At one moment we have the bardo body, which is like the Sambhogakaya, and then as that finishes and we're about to take rebirth, we come up with something that's even more gross, like the emanation body that everyone can see. Because not everyone can see the bardo body. maybe psychics and people with divine eye can see the intermediate state body. So also we try to utilize, the yogi and yogini who's practicing this would use the clear light of sleep, the sleep process also at night. They would try to use the clear light of sleep and the dream body that arises out of that clear light of sleep. That is to say, when you're having a dream, and what would the psychologists use, psychiatrists say, the rapid eye movement can be discerned. When you're dreaming, there is a sense of having some kind of existence. You might be of different form. You might be a man at that time, or a god, or a goddess, or a dog, or something else. That's your dream body. That evolves out of the clear light of sleep. And then when you awake, that clear light, that dream body also absorbs, like the Bardo body and like the Sambhoga body, Sambhogakaya can absorb, and we can emanate the waking state. We wake out of that dream body. So yogis and yoginis learn to practice in their lifetime in meditation, inducing the clear light and these various appearances. And in sleep, they practice the clear light of sleep and the dream body and the waking state, trying to recognize those and purify those, always meditating on emptiness in the context of Tantra. So that's what this text is kind of giving all the details for. So especially for those of us who don't have tantric initiations or don't practice that, it's giving us an alternative method to meditate on death, to try to visualize and imagine what that state is like. And those who are familiar with Tantra or have commitments to practice a tantric sadhana, one of the, say in Highest Yoga Tantra, one of the essential elements is to take the three bodies into the path. That means to imagine our eventual death, the clear light of death, and to recognize that, to use that to meditate on emptiness and to develop the divine pride. This is the omniscient mind. I have attained, this is the Dharmakaya. I've made it. And then to, out of compassion, to emanate out of that, rather than a fearful Bardo body, intermediate state body that comes about just due to our karma, sort of emanating out a subtler body, like the Bardo. So when the Bardo existence does occur, the yogi or yogini who has not yet achieved enlightenment but is practicing to purify these would try to recognize this not just as some strange body that I've gotten, but this is something I'm emanating for the purpose of others, and to perhaps emanate light out and imagine purifying others, preparing them, and then thinking when the time of rebirth is about to come, and one sees the father and mother that one will take rebirth in if one is together with, if one is going to be born as a human, one imagines, I'm going to take rebirth for the welfare of others. I'm going to emanate an emanation body for the welfare of others. So one can transform that otherwise impure rebirth and into a simulation of the Nirmanakaya, and over a course of one lifetime or several lifetimes like that, practicing, one can achieve an immense amount of merit and familiarity so that one can actually achieve enlightenment during one lifetime or in the Bardo state. But even if one doesn't achieve it, if one has a certain degree of development, that even at the time of death and intermediate state and rebirth, one is still conscious of these states and is able to meditate on emptiness, has a certain divine pride. One is, can you imagine being born that way, thinking I'm emanating into the world for the welfare of others? This is the reason, rather than just being aimlessly thrown by one's karma. Okay. Yeah. Frank?
This question is kind of related to that question. We keep talking about when we reach the final dissolution and we enter the clear light, we want to remember, the nature of emptiness, that the clear light is emptiness.
Mm-hmm.
say we do that, and now we're there, and we're remembering this. Now what? What's happening when we do this? Because it said that you're spending, an hour, many hours, days in the clear light. Is it that every moment we're spending, where we're actually achieving some sort of fusion of mother and son clear light, that's giving us a huge amount of purification? It's not like we instantly achieve enlightenment the moment that
I don't
happens,
think you don't achieve enlightenment necessarily instantaneously. It depends on the accumulation of merit and wisdom. Remember, that which gives rise to the actual Dharmakaya. Yeah, remember we were talking last time about substantial cause and cooperative cause. What's the substantial cause of the wisdom Dharmakaya? We say the substantial cause is the collection of wisdom. That's the substance that gives rise to the wisdom Dharmakaya. And what gives rise to the Rupakaya, the form bodies, both the Sambhogakaya and the Nirmanakaya, is what? What's the substantial cause? The collection of merit. So we usually talk about the two collections, collection of wisdom, the collection of merit. So if the person in this process, like meditating during the lifetime, if you've developed that realization of emptiness with the subtlemost mind during your meditations during lifetime, and you can bring that, if you don't attain enlightenment in that lifetime, at the time of death, if you can bring that realization to the mother clear light, the clear light of death, sort of meeting of the mother and son. This would be a nice topic for a novel, I don't know, or a comic book or something. Merging of the mother and son. Coming back to the origin. So at that time, with the subtlemost mind, meditating without any distraction at all, you can develop either an inferential understanding, continuation of an inferential understanding, or a direct realization of emptiness, and accumulate further the collection of wisdom. So in a future lifetime, that imprint of wisdom, it won't be like us when we hear about emptiness this lifetime. We don't know what it is. One has an deeply ingrained understanding of what emptiness is, and depending on the degree of that, one may be able to meditate on emptiness even as a child. Like the Buddha took the aspect, Siddhartha took the aspect of sitting and meditation and just as a child, So
to understand that it's not doing things like creating merit, and we're creating more merit because we're in a more subtle state, or we're not creating purification, we're creating more purification because we're in a subtle state. Are we?
Yeah, we're creating both. Well, we
There's all
both
of
purify.
those things.
Whenever you meditate on emptiness, you're both collecting wisdom, because a collection of wisdom, and you're also purifying, because that collection of merit, the collection of wisdom, while the wisdom is present, that acts as an antidote to the imprints of our delusions. So they are, especially as if you have a direct realization of emptiness, just like in the sutra path, on the path of seeing, the path of meditation, again and again as you meditate on emptiness in successive meditative sessions, further and further empowered by a greater collection of merit, deeper and deeper stains of ignorance, seeds of ignorance and the other delusions are eliminated from mind. They're ceased, the truth of cessation. We have greater and greater cessation. So same thing that happens through the tantric path. So, it's renowned that it's possible to achieve enlightenment in one lifetime in Tantra, but you need incredible amount of merit and the right conditions to accumulate that merit in that lifetime. It is possible, even as a beginner, what seems to be a beginner like ourselves, or Milarepa, not yet entered the path, not yet developed spontaneous bodhicitta, not yet developed spontaneous renunciation, not yet realized emptiness, but intellectually understanding these and with an aspiration to develop them through the practice of Highest Yoga Tantra during the life, in the course of 3 years and some months, one can accumulate all the merit and wisdom necessary, and one could achieve enlightenment in one lifetime. You don't have to necessarily go to death, but the way that you would be doing it is simulating that, using the clear light that is induced through meditation that's similar to the clear light of death, like through tumo or vajra recitation or something, bringing the airs into the central channel, into the heart chakra, recognizing that clear light experience as the meaning of emptiness. And then as one arises from that, that state, one can achieve the illusory body. Instead of in dream you would be, you would have a dream body. Then in the meditative state, you can simulate that in the generation stage, and eventually in the completion stage, you can actually develop an actual molding of the winds that comes about because of your accumulation of merit within that clear light. That's called the illusory body. Eventually it's separate, even separate from your physical body. So even if the physical body is decaying, if one's achieved the illusory body, one will definitely achieve enlightenment that lifetime. So that's kind of one of the aims. Eventually, through this process, maybe even in the next lifetime, you would be very prepared by that familiarity through the death process and the bardo and the rebirth, and then again encountering the Mahayana teachers and Tantra, again practicing Tantra, and one might achieve enlightenment in that lifetime or the lifetime after that. Dan, did you have a question? Oh, okay. Where in that? Yep. Done.
Just when we're meditating and when you use the clear light of death as being the meaning of emptiness, I believe that's the term used. Is that because if I had a direct realization of emptiness, that it would appear as a clear light in some way? How do I
I think the clear
visualize that term?
Yeah, the clear light here is said to have this. It is said to be, what's it called? Great empty or all empty? All empty. There's no gross dualistic appearances. It's called clear light not because there's a certain kind of light, but because that's the closest simile to it or metaphor for it. So that appearance is very similar. Like when we meditated in other courses and at the beginning of this course on the conventional clear light nature of a gross mind, okay? That's similar to the clear light appearance that dawns automatically at the time of death, but this is with our gross mind. It's said to be very difficult this is what the Mahamudra teachings are about, to try to, at first, to use that clear light as your object of concentration, and then eventually to use that as an object of investigation, because it's still a gross mind, and meditate on the emptiness of that, the emptiness of the mind. So let's say, for instance, if you had an experience of emptiness, the vacuity that would appear to your mind, because what appears to your mind when you realize emptiness is not some color or, Buddhas flying around or Garudas or I don't know what you might think emptiness, or a big box that's empty or something like that. What appears to your mind is mere vacuity. There's no sense of I, there's no sense of object, mere vacuity, but it has been induced by that analysis, say for instance, that's seen the I that you've investigated and see that the I, the appearance of the I to the mind is grasped by our consciousness as having a real existence. Just like we grasp the shadow as a kid, we perceive the shadow and think it's the boogeyman. Actually, the shadow is empty of boogeyman, generally. Maybe once in a while there's some boogeyman there, I don't know. Generally, it's empty of boogeyman. And so when you recognize that, at one moment you might have still been fearful, but maybe because you've grown up a little, and then you remember, oh, that's just a shadow. Or that's the shadow of the book. All the fear disappears, And at that moment, if you were to just concentrate on that, there would be, if you could concentrate and not let your mind become distracted, you would perceive just the mere lack of something fearful, whether you call boogeyman or burglar or something. When the mind recognizes that, of course our mind gets distracted, we don't concentrate on that, but if you concentrated on that, that would be a mere vacuity. You know what I mean? A mere emptiness, which the meaning of which you're not thinking conceptually at this time. There's no boogeyman or there's no burglar, but the meaning of that vacuity would have been induced through this analysis that there is no burglar, no boogeyman, or no self. And subsequent to that meditative state, that space-like meditation on emptiness, one would recall that one realized emptiness. If you actually had a deep realization of emptiness, there's no conceptualizing, this is emptiness at that time. But it's able to induce a remembering consciousness afterwards, and you have actually realized emptiness. So that vacuity is very, very similar to the vacuity that appears naturally when all the air is absorbed and the subtlemost mind arises. Its natural state, like the natural clear light state of our gross mind, this occurs at the time of death naturally. We don't have to do anything to do it. So when that vacuity appears, if we can recall, all things are empty, have that mindfulness that has been inculcated and brought along, the mindfulness, through these various dissolutions, then at that time we can use the subtlemost mind to meditate and to actually recall emptiness, the meaning of emptiness. Okay? I see Venerable dreaming hiding behind the stupa back there. Okay. 100,000 stupas. Did you have a question? Oh, really? Okay. Okay, so we're going to take a little break, and we'll come back. We finished the section in here talking about the stages of death, and now we began last time talking about the stages of actualizing or achieving the bardo, the intermediate state, right? So remember, as soon as the clear light of death ceases, upon the entry into the radiant black near attainment, the reverse order from that, the mind is becoming slightly grosser now. One enters into the intermediate state. One has an intermediate state body with all of its faculties and all the limbs, and in the shape of the future form that one will be born as. Even if one is going to be born in hell, one has to go through the intermediate state. Even if one's born due to the ripening of karma of immediate retribution, that doesn't mean one doesn't go through the bardo. It means there's no other rebirth state between one death and the next, rebirth, say in hell. There's no other, like being born as an animal or another human. You still have to go through the bardo, but you don't have any other rebirth state after that. So we talked a little bit about that. Which page did we get to? I just took my marker out of here.
51. Description of intermediate state.
Okay, so the description of the intermediate state. So we talked about the reverse order of the visions and so forth. So features. The entity of such an intermediate being, a bardo being, has 5 features. It has all sense faculties. How many sense faculties are there? 6 sense faculties? Do we call the mental consciousness, the mental faculty, a sense faculty? In common parlance, we say 6 senses. Depends on what he's translating. We'll have to see the Tibetan here. If it says if it just says faculties, there are 6 faculties. But if you talk about the sense faculties, usually it means the eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body faculties that absorb. because it certainly is going to have it's certainly going to have the mental faculty. So I think this means that the 5 faculties, like the 5 senses. Since it has been born spontaneously, all its major and secondary limbs are simultaneously completed. So that's one of the qualities of spontaneous rebirth. It's not that the body evolves like an embryo over time. Like when Padmasambhava was born, or Aryadeva, or other beings that are born spontaneously. Hell beings are born spontaneously. Bardo beings are born spontaneously. Just they arise with all of their limbs intact, already in the form of the being that karma has thrown. Third feature, since it has a subtle body, it cannot be destroyed even by a diamond. I think diamond here means by a vajra. It can't be destroyed by anything, any gross kind of thing. So this body, and then it says, except for birthplaces, which the being can't pass through, such as the mother's womb, it is not obstructed even by mountains, fences, and so forth. Sometimes I think it says in the sutras also it's obstructed by, it can't go through the Vajra seat at Bodh Gaya or something like that. But it's kind of like neutrinos. So you were going to say that too? Like it's not obstructed by other gross things. So if the Bardo being wants to travel somewhere, it can travel there almost instantaneously without any obstruction. Whereas we might have to make a certain path around something. The Bardo being can go, like the dream body, can go places very, very quickly, or maybe instantaneously, without being obstructed.
Could you explain why the mother's womb is exempted here as a place they can go through? Why is that?
Because that's where they're going to take rebirth, and I'm not sure what the reason is, but that's some place that they're stopped by. Yeah.
They enter and they'll start the rebirth.
Well, they have to be certain. We'll see here, just like we know from, common sense, when your mom and dad explained the birds and the bees to you, or maybe if your mom and dad didn't explain your friends in high school, or grade school, or kindergarten, wherever you were, explained, or maybe you learned from medical science. There's certain qualities that have to be present. There has to be a fertilized egg, and the womb has to be healthy, and so forth and so on. So those qualities have to be there. But I'm not sure if this is referring to the fertilized egg in the womb, or just the womb in general. So leave that for a question you might ask in the future to some of the lamas. The fifth feature, through the force of karmic powers, it can in an instant go wherever it wants, and not even a Buddha can stop it. So I'm sure all of you want to achieve that one, because you don't want to be stopped by anyone telling you can't do that, you can't go there. Okay. So in terms of changing type, so this is something that is different views in the lower tenets, in the higher, the Mahayana. Vasubandhu's Abhidharma Kosha, we could translate as treasury of Abhidharma, or treasury of higher knowledge. Here it just translates treasury of knowledge. This is the lower Abhidharma, right? The Hinayana Abhidharma. This explains that once the intermediate state of a particular being is achieved, once that's been actualized, it does not change to another type of migration among the 6 types of migrators. However, so in other words, if you were to be born and a clairvoyant would see that you have a dog or animal bardo body, that would mean you're definitely going to be born as a dog. But according to the Mahayana, it is possible to change the rebirth state when there's a mini-death between every 7 days. It is, if one hasn't found rebirth in the Bardo state, the Bardo being goes through another death evolution. It's not categorized as death, but it's kind of a mini-death. One goes, the earth element is absorbed, the water element, the fire, the air, and so forth. into a clear light, and then one arises in the reverse order in a new bardo body, which can be different according to the Mahayana, according to Asanga's Abhidharma, and here it calls, Compendium of Knowledge, the Abhidharma Samuccaya. There, in Asanga's Mahayana Abhidharma, it says that it is not certain that once an intermediate state of a particular type of being has been achieved, it will necessarily be born in that way, there being reversals into another type of migration. Reversal in this case means, I think, at the time of the mini-death arising, even if the first bardo being might have been an animal, due to the force of someone creating merit for you, say making offerings all the time, and different kinds of things like this, or making offerings with your possessions, or prayers and so forth. When that bardo mini-death takes place, when it arises out of the clear light, it can arise in maybe a higher being, maybe as a human being. So that's one of the things when we do the jangwa that are done for individuals who've passed away, that will be done with ashes of individuals. It can change the rebirth state. However, in this, yes?
But it says it is not certain that, so
What does it say? It's not certain. It is not certain.
that.
It is not certain that once an intermediate state of a particular type of being has been achieved, it will necessarily be born that way. So if you have an intermediate state of a dog, it's not from the Mahayana Abhidharma point of view, it's not certain that you'll be born as a dog, because you might take a rebirth. You might take a rebirth in the bardo and have a different kind of body, to be born as maybe a different kind of animal, or a different rebirth state, maybe as a god, or a asura, or even a hell being. It could get worse.
So then, I just want to take one step further. So at death, then, you still would take an intermediate state.
Yeah.
But you might not stay in that state.
You would stay in that state until, for say 7 days, unless you took rebirth. Say, you could take rebirth immediately, or after 5 minutes, or after 2 hours, or 3 days. No rebirth. You stay in that. But after 7 days, that bardo body kind of has a lifetime of 7 days. If it hasn't found a rebirth by 7 days, there is a dissolution of that bardo body and a re-emergence of a bardo body, which, according to the lower Abhidharma, would be the same state. It would still be a dog or an animal or whatever. According to the Mahayana, it's possible that the next bardo that evolves out of that could be a different one, could be of a different state.
What would be the cause of the change?
Accumulation of merit on your behalf, say, even by the force of people making offerings on your behalf. Or let's say it could be that the being is a bodhisattva in the bardo and is able to meditate or have compassion for others, other bardo beings. So one
Use that rebirth in the bardo to meditate. Didn't we say that? Because it's just so quick. The state
no.
once you're in the stages.
No, the bardo state can last 49 days. So a person can have a lot of fear. Most people are not going to have a very clear mind at that time, but it's possible the bodhisattvas can, and even as it will say here in a couple of paragraphs.
The mini-death process, can we use that?
Oh, the mini-death process. I don't think they can meditate. I don't know. It doesn't say anything here about that. But the bardo state itself can last for many days, and the different appearances, if one has trained the mind to recognize them in dream, like to recognize this is a dream, at this point one can recognize this is not real, this is not really fearful, if there are fearful things, and one can even, the bardo body might go to Pure Lands and see beautiful things. You know, one can accumulate merit, I think, in that way. Well, let's continue. Let's see what this says. So the Mahayana position is that the bardo state can change. However, in the systems of both the lower and upper Abhidharmas, that is the one we just talked about, the Abhidharma Kosha and the Abhidharma Samuccaya, There are persons who attain the state of a foe destroyer. What's a foe destroyer? The United States Army? What is a foe destroyer? What is it? Arhat. That's how it's translated, Arhat, right? There are persons who attain the state of Arhatship on the support of the intermediate state. So remember in Tantra, it's said that some beings can achieve enlightenment in the bardo. Even in the lower and upper Abhidharmas, it says that some beings achieve Arhatship on the basis of a bardo being. Therefore, it should not be asserted that one necessarily has to take rebirth from it. So there's a good point. So if you enter into the bardo and you say you have a particular kind of body, a human body, does that mean you have to take rebirth as a human? No, if you're highly evolved, you might achieve enlightenment on the basis of that bardo being, or achieve arhatship, in which case you don't take rebirth. Because rebirth means taking, ordinary rebirth means taking it through the force of karma and afflictions, karma and delusions. Synonyms. Ron would like this. Vasubandhu's Treasury of Knowledge, Abhidharma Kosha, explains that there are different synonyms for bardo being, intermediate being. That which is arisen from the mind arisen. Seeker of existence is another synonym. Smell eater, remember we said, what's smell eater in Sanskrit, you know? Gandharva. Intermediate state, which is bardoa, and establishing existence are synonyms. Length of life. The longest intermediate state is 7 days. I thought it was 49. Well, you have to read the rest of the sentence, right? However, since there are cases of transmigrating to the next birth immediately upon achieving the intermediate state, when the causes for rebirth aggregate, there is no certainty that it will last 7 days. If within 7 days the causes of birth do not aggregate, at the end of the 7th, a small death occurs, whereupon another intermediate state is achieved. Asanga's actuality of the levels, this is the same as the Bodhisattva Bhumi, here also another title is the Bhumi Vastu, that says that when in that manner 7 weeks have passed, so 7 mini deaths, it's 49 days, the causes for rebirth definitely aggregate and rebirth is necessarily taken. So everyone always asks, why? If it depends on karma, you've been waiting for people the mother and father, for you to be by them when they have intercourse, for a fertilized egg to be there, or some other, it might be if that fertilized egg, if you're going to be born as a human, if that's not ready, then you might take rebirth in someone else's womb, or in a petri dish, or whatever, depending on your karma, right? So somehow it says that this definitely takes place in 49 days. This is always the tradition, although you might have some reasons to doubt that. Anyway, this is what the Buddha said. Death in the intermediate state. With respect to the mode of the small death at the end of a week, at the end of every 7 days, the wind body of the intermediate being gathers in stages from the top and bottom into the heart like breath on a mirror gathering from the limits. You know what that means? You've done that, haven't you, Dorji? Breathed on the mirror or on a glass, and then the breath comes to the... So the bardo being absorbs like that. That's how we visualize in Tantra also, usually the deities, at the time of dissolution of the deities to their heart. They absorb from the top and the bottom, light-like bodies, like that, to the heart chakra. So the bardo beings absorb like that. The 80 indicative conceptions of the intermediate state, as well as the wind that serves as their mount, dissolve. So maybe that wind gathering is like the earth element absorbing, right? Because it's a very subtle wind element, form aggregate. The 80 indicative conceptions of the intermediate state, as well as the wind that serves as their mount, dissolve. Thereupon the 4 signs and the 4 empties of an intermediate being's death dawn quickly. So these 4 signs are which 4 signs? The mirage, and so forth? Seems like it's saying that's coming at these four signs come at, almost looks like it comes after the 80 indicative conceptions absorb. So it sounds like that, not quite clear if that's translated exactly precisely, if this means the four signs that come before the four empties, or if it's just another, means the four signs, semicolon, or comma, the four empties, of an intermediate being's death dawn quickly, and the clear light of death is actualized. Pardon? I cannot hear you. Can you speak a little louder?
Isn't the mini death going?
Can you speak a little louder?
I speak right here.
Oh,
Isn't the mini death going forwards and then backwards also?
yes. The person, well, like our death too. When we die, we go to the clear light, and then from the clear light, we go into the bardo state. Here, when the bardo being dies, they go to a clear light state. All of their bardo existence of that bardo life dissolves to the clear light, and then the black near attainment, the red increase, the white appearance, and so forth of the next bardo state evolve. So is that, you see some contradiction with this? No?
Would it be the same four empties as before?
The same four empties?
Same four empties as before.
As before as what? What do you mean? Yeah, that's what it says. Yeah, that's what it's saying. The four signs and the four empties of the intermediate being's death dawn quickly.
On page 51, it refers to the four signs as rods, fire, smoke, fireflies, and flame.
Right. The question I had was, here it said, the 80 indicative conceptions of the intermediate state, as well as the wind that serves as their mount, dissolve. Now, generally, the 80 indicative conceptions only dissolve after the four signs, or in the middle of the fourth sign, right? So there's some doubt there whether that's actually factually correct, that maybe a bardo being, the 80 indicative conceptions dissolve first, or whether this is just kind of just talking in general, just saying all these things happen, not necessarily in that order.
Isn't it just saying that it's just all happening very quickly, though?
Yeah, that does say quickly, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Right. Then the wind that serves as the mount of the clear light acts as the substantial cause, and the wind body of the intermediate being is achieved as before. The wind that serves as the mount of the clear light acts as the substantial cause of the intermediate being, and of the body of the intermediate being, which is again a wind body. Okay, because the mount of the clear light is a wind, subtle wind, right? The subtlemost wind, that acts as the substantial cause, and from that there is emitted or emanated a grosser kind of form than the subtlemost wind, which is called the intermediate body, the wind body. As before, simultaneous with achieving the mind of near attainment of the reverse process. So it seems to be saying in each case that that body is emanated simultaneous with the black near attainment. It doesn't sort of evolve over time. It's spontaneously arisen at that time. No matter how many small deaths occur while having the life support of the intermediate being, they are included within the intermediate state. They're not included within the death state. So these little mini deaths are not called the usual kind of death. Okay, they're still all included in it's not said that one has been reborn yet, even though one has a new intermediate state body. So here, there's some clarification about seeing the former body. Asanga's text about the levels says that even when an intermediate being, a bardo being, sees its former physical support, former body, due to the force of having severed any relationship with that body, it does not think, oh man, that's my body, what am I doing up here? And does not generate a wish to enter it. So, I mean, that's kind of our common lore, and also from Taiwan, right? or from mainland China? Taiwan. Hong Kong. Do you remember, do people believe that mommy and daddy come back? Or in the Bardo state, they might be recognizable or something. From a Buddhist perspective, from the Highest Yoga Tantra point of view, that's not the case. Remember, we read a little segment last time that if beings come back purporting to be the spirit of your relative or something like that, that they are often naughty, or maybe it could be good spirits that had accompanied that being during their lifetime, and sometimes they come back to do mischief, sometimes they come back to do good. They might try to give advice and help, but they are not the actual being, because once we enter into the actual Bardo state, we ourselves don't recognize who we were. We don't know that we were, Eric or, Thea or Linda or anything at that point.
Do we recognize other people that we associate with in the Bardo?
So once you're in the Bardo state, you might recognize other Bardo beings. Hey, I saw that one over there before, 5 minutes ago. But you don't recognize your brother or sister of last life, because that memory is the same as the memory of your former life, you being that life. It's good. Bees?
Beings.
Oh, beings. I thought you were talking about bees, birds, and I say.
Who may be in a near-death experience at the same time, and we're going through the process of death, but then one comes back and the other goes forward.
Wow, you can think of all sorts of combinations. What about 3? Remember, we were talking about near-death experiences before. This is something that maybe some of you who have good knowledge, you'll have to investigate over the years. My understanding is that if you've actually entered into the clear light of death, there is no coming back. There might be some exception, but in general, if you enter into the clear light of death, there's no coming back. If, for instance, remember we talked last time, if you've been knocked unconscious and you're not going to die, you can enter into a clear light or approach it. Like, remember we talked about seeing stars? That might be like especially a very vibrant appearance of the fire element absorbing, especially if you've been slugged. Like in the comic books, someone gets hit and they always see stars or something. Or if you've ever fainted, you might remember seeing stars. But that doesn't mean that you died and came back. Because when people talk about near death, it almost sounds like they were going to death and then they came back or something like that. From the point of view of Buddhism, once the karma of dying, the winds have been initiated, I think ordinary beings can't come back from that. There may be some yogis and yoginis that can come back from it.
Someone is on the edge of partying, or
Edge of partying.
edge of partying.
Partying.
Partying, as in leaving.
Yeah. I'm just teasing. I'm just trying to liven up.
There might be some communication between two people if they were in a similar situation, going back and forth between coming and going.
I don't know.
But anyway, I heard this story.
Okay, you heard that story. I don't know about that. Hard for me to theorize about, I don't know. You can theorize about things like that, whether the people who are about to die are communicate. I don't know how they could communicate, because they can't even, they're all of the conceptual mind is gone. They can't talk.
Story that I heard from a person who was able to live the experience of a person who passed.
Okay. Venerable.
So it seems that whether it's the clear light of death is, it's defined by the end result, is it the last goodbye or not? You don't know.
Well, someone would know. Well, someone would know. The Buddhas would know, or clairvoyants would know that this is irreversible, and you would be able to tell if a person is dying a natural death and the near signs of death are taking place. The earth element is absorbed, and the eye faculty, the person is still conscious, but the eye faculty has absorbed and the body has become more emaciated. This looks like something that's irreversible. When someone has, like, crashes off the bridge and or skids on the ice and all the, they have, maybe they remember lots of things of their lives. I'm not sure this is the actual death process.
Well, Venerable doesn't.
This actual death process would be, say in a natural death, it's quite clear what the death process is. You can see it happening there. When someone is going to die because of an irreversible injury to their body, that can take place very quickly, but we don't know what they think because they're dead. People who don't die, maybe they've almost drowned, or they've had an accident or crashed. I won't mention any names. Maybe they didn't actually die. Maybe it's like a concussion where you enter, the air is absorbed, but that's not a final. That wasn't enough for them to actually die.
Well, isn't that why you would call it near death? It's not really death. It's just
Well, near death sounds like, it sounds to me what people think it means is that you're almost there, but this is not what I'm understanding this to me. There's a lot of conversation about something that maybe we'll have to ask the next time, because I want to go a little bit further. Otherwise, as Geshe Tekchok used to say when we were studying, we'd ask all of these questions in Manjushri Institute. And Geshe Tekchok, who's now the former abbot of Sera, has already been the abbot for some years and is retired. He kind of tongue-in-cheek, he used to say, the monks at Sera never asked these amazing questions. Like, in other words, he was saying, maybe they're smarter than you. They didn't. Yeah, right. All right. We were, we took it. We asked much. The questions that Sera monks never asked. The questions that we asked. So I'm going to leave the near death for this is, I say, something for you to investigate for what that means, because if you take it that the person is actually almost at the clear light of death, or they see this tunnel or whatever, I'm not quite sure what that is. It's something for you to investigate, okay? That's your homework. That's the, okay, no, not crash, don't get any ideas. No ideas. So anyway, you don't see, when you're in the bardo, you don't recognize your former body, and spirits that come back are not that person from the Buddhist perspective. Clarification about 7 days. Some interpreters have said, some commentators have said that the statement that the lifespan of an intermediate being, that the lifespan being 7 days, refers to the days of the individual type of migrators. Say, for instance, if you had a hell being, bardo, the hell days, one hell day in the first hell realm is enormous number of years, human years. So that some people say, well, that hell bardo being living 7 days is like, might be eons. So the comment here is that, however, this is not correct. That's a comment. Because an intermediate being, a bardo being, who is to be reborn as a hell being or a god of the form realm, would have to dwell in those states for 7 days of those types of beings, resulting in the great absurdity that one would have to assert that there are cases of dwelling in the intermediate state for a great many millions of years without aggregation of the causes of rebirth. Why the author feels that that's absurd, you'd have to also investigate. Why is that absurd? Well, maybe because the Buddha didn't talk about such things, or maybe maybe there are other reasons why the author talks about that as being absurd. But generally, we say that the bardo beings last 49 days. So there's something to think about. Some commentators say this. This Aki Yongsen, the commentator of this text, the author of this text, says that's absurd. Clarification about the mode of exit from the body after death. One who is to be reborn as a hell being exits from the anus. That means the consciousness, excuse me, is a word, A hungry ghost exits from the mouth, an animal from the urinary passage. If one is to be born as a human, one exits from the eye, a god of the desire realm from the navel, as a yaksha, one of the kind of asuras, from the nose, a god of magical accomplishment, or a probable human from the ear. Now, I didn't check the Tibetan here, but I think what means a probable human, I think at this point he was translating Kinara. Do you know this word, Kinara? Kinara are mythical beings that kind of look like humans, but they're not. So they say, in Tibetan we say miyam chi, which means, are they human or what? Mi means human, am means or, chi means what. So like, what? Is that a human or what? Kind of like that, Kinaras. I think that some people still say that, about me, okay. Is that a monk or what? That might be what he's translating here. I'll check the Tibetan next time.
Physical being, like somebody I would see on the road, or some kind of spirit?
Some kind of spirit is possible to see. And, I mean, it depends on your karma. Depends on your karma. Kinaras. They're the king of Kinara. There's some sutras where the Buddha... Right. But a Kinara is not a Naga. Kinara is of some other kind of state. Looks like a human to some people. If one is to be reborn in the form realm, the exit is from the middle of the brow, and if one is to be born in the formless realm, it is from the crown of the head. These are set forth in the 8th chapter of a tantra called the Samputa Tantra and other tantras. So there's an objection, there's a qualm. This contradicts the explanation, someone thinks this contradicts the explanation of Asanga's treatises on the levels, which we were quoting earlier, and other texts like that state, when a body is abandoned, the consciousness exits from the heart. Oh, come on, it's no contradiction. Exiting from the heart, it exits from the heart, but then it has to exit some other place of the body. And so although the mind and the subtle, when it exits, is it already a Bardo being, or is it not yet a Bardo being when the consciousness exits?
It is.
Why? Good, you can use your logic. Why is it already a Bardo being, according to you?
Because it has emerged out of the clear light, and that it's irreversible.
Right. If it has left the body, if it's leaving the body, if it's leaving the indestructible heart, indestructible drop at the heart, it necessarily has entered into the black near attainment. It has to leave the clear light to do that. So it is already a Bardo being. So that Bardo being has no obstruction. So it could end. It doesn't have to exit one of these orifices. But the Buddha in the Tantras did say, like for instance, if you were to touch a person at various places, it might induce the consciousness to leave when the consciousness did leave through that place. So you shouldn't touch the lower, the sexual organs or other lower orifices of the body. That may be one reason why that. But I think the Bardo, my own feeling is that the Bardo being doesn't necessarily, once it leaves, it has to leave from the heart. But then it could leave anywhere from the body, but the Buddha did mention that various beings would leave, in some cases, from these various orifices. Question: what does Vasubandhu mean when he says, 44, no, when dying in stages, the mind dies and exits at the feet, navel and heart, and he also mentions in his commentary, is this 44 referred to Abhidharma Kosha or to another text? Is it to a tantric commentary? We have to look what text that is. So it may be Abhidharma Kosha or another text. And further in the commentary to that text, he says, what is it saying? If one is to be reborn in bad migrations, the consciousness ceases at the feet, as a human at the navel. If one is to be reborn as a god, or when a foe destroyer dies, the consciousness stops at the heart. This is a question. What does he mean by this? So the answer is, as the commentary explains, Vasubandhu's commentary, the mind ceases at those places, and thus these passages merely indicate different ways that the mental consciousness stops through the force of the body senses ceasing in places such as the feet. So what is this talking about? I think this is talking about a situation well before the white appearance and red increase and black near attainment, when the mental consciousness is finally ending, and the sense consciousnesses, as the commentary explains, a mind ceases at those places, and thus these passages merely indicate the different ways that the mental consciousness stops through the force of the body senses ceasing. What's the body sense? Body faculty, right? Ceasing in places such as the feet. Since it's, in general, the mental consciousness will cease to a certain degree as the sense faculties cease, right? Because the mental consciousnesses that would have arisen in dependence on those sense consciousnesses, they can't arise. So some mental consciousness will be absorbing in that sense. Since it does not teach that the consciousness exits to the outside from those places, it does not contradict what was explained earlier. So again, this is kind of an esoteric point. A clarification about perception. Vasubandhu's Abhidharmakosha explains that the Bardo beings are seen by others of similar type. So this question you were talking about before you were talking about whether the person who's dying could kind of communicate. I was joking that the Bardo beings can see other Bardo beings. It's true. They can see Bardo beings of similar type. So Bardo beings who are going to be born as animals can see other Bardo animals, but they can't see Bardo humans. Or what do you think? Isn't that a similar type, Bardo being?
Formless, that sort of thing, would that be a classification that would, so that animals...
What about the formless Bardo beings? Is there such a thing?
Well, no, what I meant is merely that the animals could see humans because they're part of the desire.
Animals can see humans in general because they're part of the desire. So you think the Bardo animals should see humans? Okay. Yeah, okay. It would be, you could use logic, but here, let's see what the text says. I'll read that again. The Abhidharmakosha explains that intermediate beings are seen by others of similar type and by those with pure divine eye, a special kind of clairvoyance, not just impure divine eye. Concerning that, a divine eye that is attained through birth is impure, like, say, some beings, just nagas and others, some kind of beings of the desire realm gods and form realm gods, have a certain kind of clairvoyance that is attained through birth. That's impure divine eye. Whereas one that's attained through the power of former meditation is pure. So in that lifetime, if one has meditated and developed tranquil abiding, penetrative insight, and developed clairvoyance that way, that's a pure, you can develop what's called divine eye. That's a pure divine eye. So Vasubandhu's auto-commentary, his self-commentary on the Abhidharmakosha, Bhasha in Sanskrit means auto-commentary. This also explains that intermediate beings of higher type perceive lower ones. So in general, the gods of the various desire realms and the form realms they can perceive with their divine eye the gods of lower realms, but they can't see the ones of higher realms. So I don't know in this case, in terms of your question, whether I don't know. This is part of your midterm exam. Whether the bardo animals, because human, in the world, animals can perceive humans. Whether the bardo animals, someone born as an animal in the bardo realm, can see humans in the bardo realm. Maybe you can have pets. If I don't think so, though. I think probably.
Yeah, but we can't see God, and they can see us,
Yeah,
in
right.
our present.
Right, but animals now can see you, and you can see the animals in general, right?
Right.
That's your point.
Right.
So I don't know. It seems one would have to, have to be a question. I don't think it would be worth wasting the Dalai Lama's time with those kind of questions. But those, you'd have to ask someone.
Better get the experience yourself.
Yeah, but anyway, there's something, again, to think about. There's some things that are left a little bit unclear here. Clarification about size, dimensions. Vasubandhu's Abhidharmakosha explains that an intermediate being of a human of this world, notice all the qualifications of this world, it means the southern continent, has the size of a 5 or 6 year old youth. However, it is said that such is not one pointedly certain. Maybe there's some bardo beings that are bigger. But so how big is a 6-year-old? Well, I don't know. It could be any. So it's not the same. The bardo being, if the bardo being is the bardo being of a future human rebirth, it has a particular color. It has that wind body, very subtle body. It's not obstructed. It has all its senses and all its limbs spontaneously produced. It has a shape. It has a size about the size of a youth of a human, or of the other beings. Also a small dog or maybe a small cockroach. I don't know. Aspect. Asanga's Actuality of the Levels says that to an intermediate being of bad migration, such as the animal realm, pretas, or hell beings, there appears an appearance of night pervaded by darkness, or kind of like a big black banner. To an intermediate being of a happy migration, the humans, the asuras, or the devas, there appears an outstretched white cloth or banner, or night pervaded by moonlight. This doesn't mean the white appearance of death, but it's going to be very, very dark to someone who's going to be born in the lower realms, is more fearful. And so there's a certain amount of lightness to a being that's going to be born in the upper realms. Color. The Sutra of Teaching to Nanda, the Entry into the Womb. So this was a sutra. Who was Nanda? Was that Buddha's attendant? Huh? Wasn't his name Nanda? It was Ananda. Good, okay. Who was Nanda? Okay, we'll find out who Nanda was. So there's some teaching to someone named Nanda on entry into the womb. This sutra explains that the body's color in the intermediate state, if one is to be born as a hell being, it's like a log burned by fire. If one is to be born as a hungry ghost, it looks like water, kind of shimmering in water color, I guess. Of an animal, like smoke. Of a god of the desire realm, or a human being, gold. And a god of the form realm, white. Okay, so if a clairvoyant were to, or let's say the lamas were to see a bardo being, they could tell by the color. Maybe we would say like the aura in a certain sense. There's a certain shade or hue that one could perceive the state of that being, where that person was going to be born. Shape. Vasubandhu's Abhidharmakosha says that an intermediate being has the fleshy aspect, or the physical shape, of the prior state of that migrator, as which it will be reborn. Okay, so this is sort of another one of those points where some terminology from the sutras comes in. Prior state, so the Bardo being has the, what's the word here? The aspect or physical shape of the prior state of the migrator as which it will be reborn. So prior state here is a general term. Prior existence. There are different kinds of existences, or in Tibetan we say sipa. There's barsi, intermediate existence, which is the Bardo being. Then something called prior existence. I think it's ngunsi, which actually refers to the life prior to death. It doesn't mean prior to the Bardo state. So if the Bardo being has the appearance of the prior state to which it will be born, it means that lifetime, if it's going to be born as a human, that's called a prior state. So that's the terminology that's used in the sutras. So it enumerates the different kinds of states or existences here. The birth state, the first moment of connecting to a new life. The prior state is the point from the moment after connecting to the new life until the death. Why is it called prior? It's prior to death. The death state, existence during the last period of death or at the time of experiencing the clear light of death. And then the intermediate state. So we go through those in succession. Say if you start from the intermediate. Intermediate gives rise to the birth state when you enter into the fertilized egg if you're going to be born as a human, say in the womb. Then immediately after the birth state is the prior state. From that moment all the way until death, the clear light of death. Then the death state, the clear light of death before the Bardo. Some people mistaking the mere words of the term prior state, they just misinterpret prior state. They assert that an intermediate being has the physical aspect of the former life, thinking that prior state means, what came before the Bardo. Also others, seeing the explanation in a text by a Sangha that it has the physical shape of the next life, because he actually explains it, meaning in his text saying the next life rather than previous state. They assert that it has the physical aspect of the former life for 3.5 days, because there's 7 days in this Bardo being, right? And the next life for 3.5 days. This is kind of baloney. Lama Tsongkhapa's Lanrim Chemo explains that these are only fabrications without correct sources. That's the same as saying it's baloney. Okay. For the word prior in the term prior state is prior relative to the death state of the next life, but not prior to the intermediate state. So that's important to know. These are called, you could call them states or you could call them existences, because it's a word, I think it's bhava in Sanskrit. He's just translating as state. This, just let me finish. This is because Vasubandhu's Abhidharmakosha says that possessing the fleshy form of the prior state will occur. In that text, he uses the future tense and not the past. Yeah, Frank.
Would the boundary between the birth state and the prior state be like physical birth from the womb?
No, I don't think so. I think it's birth here doesn't refer to the state
starts at like conception, right?
Yeah.
Embryos and things, and then prior state might start, when you're physically born.
Here it says just the prior state, existence from the moment after connecting to the new life. So usually the birth is just an instant when the consciousness enters into the fertilized egg, and the next instant, one is already in the prior state, meaning prior to death. One is already aging. And
Abortion and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, from a Buddhist perspective, as soon as the mind has entered into the fertilized egg, it's a sentient being. That's when we were talking about contraception before. That's why, from a not knowing more, we might presume it's better to prevent the egg and sperm from meeting, because if they do meet, like say for instance some contraceptives that cause, I'm not sure, that through chemical means cause the fertilized egg to be sort of dispelled from the wall of the womb or wherever, the uterus or wherever, and some kinds of...
RU487, expels the embryo.
Okay, I thought it sounded like a new computer chip or something, the way you said that. Okay. I was just hoping. He was talking about the new RU-487. Also, what is it, coil or something, that some other kind of contraceptive that ladies use? IUV, is that also cause the fertilized egg?
The uterus.
So it prevents it from implanting, but it still could be fertilized in that case. So from that point of view, if you were not knowing more, you might choose to prevent the egg and sperm from meeting at all. Okay, so then on page 56 it says, also with regard to the explanation that an intermediate being, a Bardo being, has the aspect of that sentient being as whom it will be reborn, some say that the intermediate being of a migrator who in his next life will not have all the sense faculties. Say you're going to be born blind. Some people say that Bardo being also does not have eyes, doesn't have all the senses that the next person is lacking. If you're going to be not have your, if you're going to be born deaf, the Bardo being will be deaf or something. This is very wrong, Akio Yonsen says, because incompleteness of sense faculties such as eyes occurs after taking rebirth in a place of birth such as a womb. Also, nowhere does it state that a Bardo being, an intermediate being, does not have all sense faculties. Everywhere it seems to say they have all their sense faculties in all the limbs. Furthermore, it would be extremely absurd if, due to the mere explanation that it has the aspect of the being as whom it will be reborn, the intermediate being would have to be similar in all aspects. Okay, so he likes to point out these absurdities. So just to mention here, almost finished, mode of movement. Asanga's text says that an intermediate being of the God realm who's going to be born as a God proceeds upwards. The human, straightforward, moves forward, and of bad migration moves downward head first. 3 realms. In order to be born in either the desire or the form realms, it is necessary to pass through the intermediate state. How about the formless realm? You don't pass through the Bardo state, right? Therefore, Tsongkhapa's Lamrim Chemo says that the assertion that there is no intermediate state for those who have committed actions of immediate retribution is not correct. Remember, we talked about this before. So let's stop there. Next time we'll finish up the Bardo and begin rebirth. That will be after Thanksgiving, so next week, this Thursday, we don't have a class. Right? So let's try to dedicate our energy, the virtuous karma that we created. Even if you don't think you created any virtuous energy, you can think you've created some virtue this lifetime and rededicate that again and again. Once you've dedicated the merit, doesn't mean you can't dedicate it again. By the force of dedicating it again and again, it could become like the dedication of great beings who have single-pointed concentration and can dedicate very forcefully. Whatever merit I've created tonight, may it not give rise to simply samsaric pleasure in the future, which might very well be like a plant that only gives 1 year of flowers before passing away, 1 year of fruit. In whatever way it ripens, may it continually give rise to my practice of the spiritual path. May it become the cause of my achieving the 2 bodhicittas, conventional mind of bodhicitta, altruistic wish to attain enlightenment, born out of compassion, and the ultimate bodhicitta, within the mind of a bodhisattva, the realization of emptiness. May this karma bring about these causes and my eventual enlightenment, my quick enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. And then seal the dedication in the meditation on the emptiness of the three spheres that are being, of the act of dedication. The merit that is dedicated seems to be findable, but is a mere imputation. The act of dedication, joining the merits to the goals, can't be found anywhere. It's a mere name imputed to that collection of parts. And the goals dedicated, likewise, the achievement of bodhicitta, the achievement of enlightenment, and so forth, conventionally designated, but not existing inherently, not findable from their own side.